At this point, I feel like I say this in every video, but I'm gonna say it again. This is a bit more of a controversial topic. Today we're gonna talk about whether you can house multiple leopard geckos together in the same enclosure. So there's quite a big spectrum of opinions on whether you can keep multiple geckos together or not, ranging from you can keep as many as you want in as small of an enclosure as you want, all the way to the other end of you can never house any leopard geckos together. They have to be in their own individual enclosures no matter what. Personally, based on my experience and my research, I fall somewhere slightly in the middle of these. My very short answer being that you can house certain leopard geckos together and they'll do just fine, as I have with maybe 3 or so pairs so far. However, there are a lot of guidelines, you can call them, that you would have to follow to make sure they're going to be safe and healthy and get along with each other. So right off the bat, keeping multiple male leopard geckos together is a pretty big no-no in just about everybody's eyes. Now, we take in different rescue animals with emerald scales, and we took in some geckos where there were, I think it was 2 males and 2 females housed together in a 5-gallon. Personally, I tend to suggest a 20-gallon minimum for a single leopard gecko, so shoving 4 into a 5-gallon does not work very well. The geckos did not come out too well either, one of which had all of his toes bitten off and was covered in scars because the male basically bullied her because he didn't like her as much as the other female. Now, hopefully, if you're researching geckos, you would by now know that that is not a good idea, but that is a rare case that hopefully does not happen too often. Hopefully. Females, on the other hand, can occasionally get along in the same enclosure. However, there are risks that come along with that. So, because males tend to be more territorial and dominant towards each other, keeping more than one male in the same enclosure will pretty much always result in them fighting or stressing each other out to the point that one is injured or killed, or both are killed if they manage to injure each other enough. Hopefully you would realize this before they're dead, but they can fight quickly, and you definitely do not want to risk this. So if you have your eye on 2 male geckos and you're thinking of keeping them together, I'm gonna crush your dreams now. Please don't do it. Now, there's gonna be people that say the exact same thing about keeping females together and keeping a male and a female together. Obviously, if you're breeding, this is going to be an exception. The male and female are gonna have to be together at some point to actually copulate and create some babies, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. We can jump straight into multiple females together. Now, they can also have interesting attitudes where they are simply not going to want to get along with other geckos, but there are some cases where they do. Now, like I said, I've done this maybe with 3 pairs of females or so, and they all did perfectly fine. But there are a lot of things that come along with this that are essentially more of a pain than housing them separately, which I'll get into in just a minute. But the first step you're going to have to take is actually see if these 2 females are going to get along. This by itself is risky because you are still putting them together, and even if you're monitoring them, something can happen, and then as soon as you're done monitoring them, something else can still happen because they're animals, they can just like change their mind. But because there's no guarantee that 2 geckos are gonna get along, this means that you can't exactly just go out, buy 2 geckos and hope that they get along, because if they don't, they're gonna have to be separate, meaning you'll need a second enclosure perfectly set up and ready to go. Now, in my case, because I keep a handful of animals and they're coming and going as we get different rescues, I thankfully always have about another like 5 or 6 enclosures that can be set up at any time if an animal does not get along with another animal. So if you have 2 enclosures already set up, in case they don't get along, then it's probably best to just go ahead and separate them anyway. You can take them out together, maybe, depending on how they act. As you can see, there's a couple around the room right now. But let's say you do decide to set up 2 full enclosures. You're gonna get 2 female geckos, see if they get along, and if they do get along, you're gonna put them together. Again, things could change. They might not always end up getting along in the end, but let's say they do end up doing really well. This enclosure will need to be quite different than an enclosure for 1 gecko. First off, they're gonna need more space because there's 2 animals in the area. Like I said, my usual rule is a 15 to 20 gallon for a single gecko, which means that ideally 2 geckos will have more space. Some people will say a 30 for 2, some will say a 40, and I'm sure there's other opinions on that. But it does not end there because geckos need lots of hiding places. You might have heard the rule before that 1 gecko needs 3 hides, 1 hide in the warmer part of the enclosure, 1 hide in the cooler part of the enclosure, and then a 3rd hide, which you'd call a humidity hide or a moist box, it has lots of names, and this would basically be where the gecko can go and easily shed. I've gone into detail with those on a leopard gecko care video that I did last year or something, but because you're gonna have 2 geckos, that means you might need 6 hiding places. It's gonna be kind of hard to cram 6 things into an enclosure, but that's ideally what you're going to be doing if you have 2 leopard geckos together. Now you could probably get by with just 1 humidity hide, because chances are they won't probably go in the shed at the same time, but doing so could be considered cutting corners with your husbandry, and it's not the smartest thing to do. So let's go ahead and say you would need 6 hides in an enclosure for 2 leopard geckos, which at that point you might as well just separate them into 2. So basically what I'm getting at is, even if 2 females can get along at certain times, in the end it's probably more convenient for both you and the animal to separate them. Something that I forgot to mention is, let's say you have 1 gecko, you put food in its bowl, and then you come back to see if it ate. If the food is gone, you're like, okay, cool, it ate. But if you have 2 geckos, you don't know how much each one of them actually ate. So this means you also have to monitor their feeding when there's more than one, because you do not want one hogging the food or the nutrition over the other. Ow, why are you biting me? So at this point, you might be questioning, like me, what's even the point in keeping leopard geckos together? Are there any? At first I was like, yeah, it will be beneficial because there's less enclosures to clean, a little bit less space taken up, less heating sources being used. But in the end, you're gonna need the same amount because they are individual animals with individual necessities. And then when it comes to feeding, is one of them really taking over the food dishes? Like, even if you have multiple dishes in there, there's a pretty solid chance that one could just go in and swoop up all the food before the other even gets a chance to eat. In other cases, the geckos have eaten out of the same bowl just fine. They kind of take turns and it's kind of cute, but again, there are risks with that. Who knows if one will get angry because somebody's hogging all the food, or if one ends up just not getting enough nutrition because of that. And then there's things like monitoring its poop even. Most of the time you just go in, pick the poop up, and you're good to go. But poop is a great way to basically keep track of the health of your animal. So let's get kind of graphic and gross. Let's say one of the poop is a weird color and it's like mushy and not looking too good. How are you actually gonna know which gecko that's coming from? Maybe one is sick or has something going on, maybe it's not digesting its food well, but you really can't like tell which poop it came from unless you actually see it pooping. On top of that, let's say one is sick. Then that means that it may be something contagious that can end up in one of your other geckos. So you might end up with double the problems if the sickness spreads across the entire enclosure and then you have to deal with it in more than one gecko. The more I talk about this, the more I realize that I will not be housing leopard geckos together in the future. And like I said, you might be wondering, why did you even do it in the past? Well, it was mostly so that I could see what it's like myself. I did it as safely as possible, but I didn't want to just listen to random things that I read online. I wanted to really see just how it is. And in the past I have done it in an effort to save time and space, but in the end, that's really not worth it when it comes to the health of an animal. And like I said, it doesn't even really save any time or space because you need a larger enclosure and you need to like spend more time on everything. Maybe this video sounded a little bit biased. I tried to keep it as unbiased as possible with all the different opinions, but as you can tell, I'm kind of swaying to the side of really just avoid housing them together unless you are doing some sort of breeding project. But if you are breeding, hopefully you will have had enough experience with the geckos already that you can make your own educated decision on the topic. So there we go. That's just about everything I've got on whether you can house multiple leopard geckos together. Here's an overview. Male leopard geckos, don't house them together. Female leopard geckos, you might be able to house together, but it comes with its risks and its demands and extra guidelines, and at a certain point, is it really worth the benefit that you're getting for doing so? So let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. Again, if you have more than one gecko, chances are they can hang out and chill together. There will be cases where they don't get along too well, but there's always those times where they really don't mind each other. So it's definitely fun. I love having lots of leopard geckos. I don't know why, I'm just addicted to them. So that's it. Okay, that's it. I'm Alex, and thanks for watching.